Oh. My name is Bentley M. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is April 11th of 2015. I have a sponsor. I sponsor as many people as I absolutely can. And I have a home group. It is in Wake Forest. It's called the Wake Forest Working with Others group. We started it 2 years ago, and it is taken hold. And I believe we're making an impact on that community, and that was the goal of starting that meeting. I'm just trying to get past Bentley from Rolesville. I just moved out there a year ago. I'm not from Rolesville. I just happen to live there. There's real. I've got property there. I mean, I've got no other ties. I did grow up in Houston, Texas. Somewhat. I was born there, and I lived there until I was about 8 years old and 7 years old, and moved to Austin. And then from Austin, I ended up in Raleigh. So as a child, I kind of moved around a decent amount. I mean, more than others, and then less than many others. So it was about an average childhood. I had a really good childhood. I had great parents. They divorced when I was younger. And so I had two great parents. And then my mom got remarried, and then I had three great parents. It seemed like I always had good people in my life who were wanting me to do well, who were guiding me, doing their best to guide me. You know, I didn't always want to be guided, and so it makes it hard to be guided when that's the mind frame you've got. So I ended up in Raleigh, and once I got in enough trouble, I was able to convince my parents to let me go back to Houston and live with my dad, and I thought that was going to kind of be a new chapter, and it was, but it was like a new chapter of the same book. Nothing really changed. I got in plenty of trouble. My story starts out with drugs. Which I used to shy away from, but you know, my story's my story. If you need me to change it, I'd go talk to your sponsor. I don't know. Start out with drugs, I think, merely because that's what was around and it was easy to get a hold of. What I will tell you is that today, having gone through the big book and understanding exactly what makes me an alcoholic, I'm not a drug addict. So I don't go to drug addict meetings. I don't introduce myself as an addict because I'm not one. I'm probably a hard drug user, a problem drug user. But when the time comes, and the time came to stop because of a sufficient reason, I did, and I did not go back to it. And I could never do that with alcohol. I'm not one of those folks that remembers the first drink. I mean, I think I do, technically. Like I was, couldn't tell you what age I was, but I was sipping off of my dad's margarita, and then I remember he walked away, and I just slammed the thing down, and I don't remember feeling any kind of way. I just except embarrassed because they realized that I drank it, and people asked me about it, and were kind of making a big deal about it. And so I just remember feeling embarrassed. I did not light up. It didn't just all click and make sense right there. My next drink really probably wasn't until I was about 15 or so. And same kind of thing. Drank some vodka, threw the football out in the street. Life didn't click. You know, it wasn't this feeling of immediate satisfaction or an answer. But it did make me feel a part of. Got to hang out with the big boys, and that was important for me. And it did warm me up a little bit, right? But I probably just didn't get drunk enough because there wasn't enough to share. And who knows? What did happen was I did get in enough trouble that I got introduced to AA at an early age. I was probably about 15 or 16, 16 for sure, because I was around AA until I was 18. And what I learned in that time was that AA worked for a lot of people. And they were happy, joyous people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so that there was something here. I could feel it, I could see it, and I was even a part of it to an extent. Looking back, I can tell you I had a very fellowship-based sobriety. It was not, my focus was not to uncover truths about myself and work the steps and look deep within, and find this power greater than myself. I just kind of want to hang out with people who seemed happy and liked me and accepted me. And y'all and we do a really good job of doing that. But I found around the age of 18 that I just didn't feel like I was relating. I heard a lot of things like I lost my house and my wife and all these things and these drunkalogs, and I hadn't had that happen yet. I wasn't old enough to have that stuff. And I either missed the message or it wasn't carried. I can't really make a claim onto either. So I'll lean into it was my fault. I just missed the message. But what that did do was let me know that AA did exist. And so I would say I remember 21. When I turned 21, that was a very significant time. I could hand my ID to a person on the other side of the bar, and they would slide a drink my way, and that felt like absolute freedom. And I remember I went and did that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and quickly realized that this is exactly what life is about. So I don't know if that's when it happened or not. What I do know is what ensued, and my drinking progressed. And so drinking became more and more important to me. Partying became important to me, and then at some point it just became more important than other things. And slowly, it wasn't like it just one day was more important than everything. It just became more important than things one at a time. Like it became more important than being on time to work. And it became more important than getting enough sleep. And then it became more important than going to work. It became more important than showing up for others. And little by little, it progressed that way. So eventually, I found a woman that was willing to marry me. And I think most of it was just because she was pregnant. I don't think that I was a catch. And so we got married, and we had a child, and up until that child was born, I would just have this series of like repeated instances where I would promise to come home after work, and I worked at a restaurant bar. It was more of a bar. They served food. And I would promise to come home right after work or after a couple of drinks. And then I would stumble through the door like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And this would happen over and over again. Eventually got a couple of DUIs, and they took my license away, and then I found out you could get a scooter, and you didn't need a license for that. Not a problem. My problems were solved with that. And so then I would drive this scooter around, and then I would wreck it, and I would lose it. And things would just start happening that I couldn't quite explain. It was, and I would laugh it off. there's a part in the book that talks about, could we actually be honest with, a therapist or a wife or someone, a family member. And I don't think I really had that ability because drinking was just so important to me. What had happened was, and like I said, it wasn't just the first time or I can't pinpoint the exact time that it happened. But what I knew without a shadow of a doubt was that when I drank, everything got better. I got a little taller. I got a little braver. I got funnier. I definitely somehow looked more attractive in the mirror, and that was important. And I just didn't care so much about what you thought about me. And I was willing to make a fool of myself to make you laugh, And a lot of people circle around you when you do stuff like that and live that way. And so I thought that was important to me. But at some point, all that was gone, and the alcohol wasn't. So I proceeded to drink through this pregnancy, promising that I would come home and that things would change over and over again. And I had, probation to deal with, and had to go to jail on the weekends, and just some minor stuff, that a lot of dads do during pregnancy. It felt normal. It didn't seem like that big of a deal. I don't know if you can relate to that, but none of my alcoholic problems really seemed like they were really going to be that big of a deal. They should be understood. And the truth is, if you understood how it made me feel, how alcohol fixed me, you'd want me to drink, And if it did for you what it did for me, I would want you to drink. And I was just convinced that that's what life was supposed to be like, and that's how it was supposed to be for others. So eventually things got bad enough, and I treated that woman very, very poorly. I was not a good husband. I was not a good partner. Didn't look like a great potential father. And I remember kind of holding on and begging to this idea that, like, you always hear that the day you see your child born, everything changes, And I'd heard that, and I kind of held on to that. And I remember being at the hospital, and my son was born, and I just remember hoping that, like, man, this is going to be it. Like, now I'll get it. I'll figure it out. I'll grow up. I'll stop getting in trouble. Something's going to make sense. And I remember it was a beautiful moment. He came out, and I'm holding him, and I'm ready to beat the nurse up because she's picking him up and dropping him and doing a test. And I'm like, well, I don't know why you would do that to a newborn baby. He just went through, hell. So I had a little bit of a, paternal instinct. I was a father. I cared for that child. I cared deeply for that child. And I remember holding him, and I remember the fear gripping me. And what happened was, I had hoped that something different I just would feel different inside. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that nothing had changed. There was no power there, or the power that I needed had not shown up in that moment, in that scenario. So I promised to be a good dad, and I promised to change my habits, and I meant that with every fiber of my being. Remember, I was going to beat that nurse up for dropping my baby, and and over again, I would break those promises, and I did not want to, and I did not mean to, and I had every intention of keeping them, and I just couldn't. And it would happen every time with I'm just going to have a few drinks. Or I'm just going to drink until this time. And then before I knew it, it was more drinks than I planned on, and it'd be later than I thought it was going to be. And that just kept happening over and over. And so I tried to stop drinking one time, and it was an ultimatum. I didn't really want to stop. And so I think I went for a period of about somewhere between 4 and 6 months not drinking, and I was absolutely miserable. I was a terrible person to be around because sobriety is what my problem is, right? Alcohol is not really my problem, it's sobriety. And sobriety is unbearable for a guy like me. Living in this world without something to change the way that I feel or mask or alter my presence, my being, my feelings is absolutely unbearable for someone like me. And so I went that period of time, and we were at a beach house, and with her friends, and one of them, he said, "Hey man, like, just have a beer with us. Nothing's gonna go wrong. You're around good people. Everything's okay." And I did. And the worst thing that could have happened, which was nothing went wrong, and everything was okay. And the next day I needed to drink. And it wasn't like I had the shakes. It was an internal feeling, right? It was this, what we know today as the phenomenon of craving, what I would have never identified it as, back then. But alcohol had entered my system, and my body said, I need more of this, right? And that's what I finally learned, or got to learn when I got here. I'd like to say that was when it happened and all that, but we ended up getting divorced because of my drinking. I quit showing up at home sometimes, and that's not great to do when you've got a toddler or a 1-year-old and a wife who's going to school and work. And I'm having trouble keeping jobs, and I'm out partying, and sometimes I just don't come home. So eventually we got divorced. And I remember waking up the first morning, and I'm at home. I say I'm at home. I'm at my father's house. It's where all heroes go, right? It's back home to the parents. But thank God for them. So I remember waking up, and I just had this stark realization that I'm not going to see my child again. It's not that I'm going to see him again. It's just that I'm never going to wake up in the same home as him again. Like, I'm not going to have a complete family. And how did this happen? And it tore me apart. It was one of the few times that I had no one, like, there was just nothing else to blame. It was a quick look in the mirror of, this is because of you, and there's no one else to blame, and you can't fix it. And I remember feeling that and thinking, this isn't going to work. And so I don't think it was necessarily immediately after, but it was that night. I remember I went to the bar and I drank until I just didn't feel, right? I drank for oblivion. And that'd be fine if it solved my problems. A lot of people will drink for oblivion. They'll drink and they got a rough night. They drink, they have a blackout, and it was just a bad night. What happened for me is I don't think I took a sober breath after that, and it had nothing to do with this idea that I had lost my family. That was not fueling my drinking. I would have told you that it was at the time. I would have told you that I was self-medicating or whatever people want to call these types of things, coping these days. But what had happened was really, not only was existence just intolerable, but at some point in my drinking career, I had crossed the line, right? And the book talks about that, where we cross over this line into alcoholism and we can't go back. Again, I wouldn't have told you that at the time, but today, thank you to all of you, like, I know this. And I drank pretty much every day. And then my drinking progressed even further from there, and so I really just don't remember much. There's just events, It's like I got this apartment. Couldn't pay rent. borrowed money to get the gas turned on. The gas was never on. I took cold showers in the winter. That's what I remember about that apartment. I think I was there for about 6 months, left in the middle of the night. Because that's how I leave things, just midnight moves. And find somebody's couch to crash on. And that's pretty much what it looked like for the most part. I would get jobs and I would lose them. I got jobs that I really liked having. The business that I'm in right now, I found it. I ended up being someone's helper, and found a passion. And I lost that job. I let him down all the time. I couldn't show up on time. I would sleep through my alarm. I'd be so drunk. Eventually the alarm stopped working. It just wouldn't wake me up. And these things would just keep happening. And this entire time, I'm wanting to be a good father and I'm wanting to show up and I can't. I'm supposed to go see my kid or pick him up every other weekend and I'm too drunk to get there. And I've got so many arrests on my record and so many, just bills and liens and all kinds of crap that I can't get my car legal, and I'm borrowing money to get it legal and somehow I can't get it legal, right? Everything that I'm doing is going to alcohol. And I'm a barroom drinker. Don't get me wrong, I drank by myself plenty. But I would have, $60, $100 bar tabs just every day. It's just how I lived. And little by little, I lost everything. And I don't mean the cars and the wives and the family. What I mean is I could not reconcile the kind of person that I was, because I'm a good person. I'm a kind person. I care about other people. I care about my family. I want to be a good dad. I love my child. And yet all my actions, they just don't line up. They don't line up. I cannot reconcile when I look at myself in the mirror every single day and say, how did you get here? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know what happened. I cannot explain the path that I'm on versus the person that I am. They just don't meet. And it became lonelier and more terrifying. Until the point where it just wasn't that scary anymore. Then I just kind of accepted that I was just this is kind of what life is and this is what it's going to be. I'm just going to die on this bar stool, or age here and die eventually, I'm sure. And so I just kind of accepted that and lived a hopeless life of just alcoholic torture. So there's a moment, it's significant, I forget to share it sometimes, but it's been coming back to me lately. There's a moment I'm kind of just, at this point I'm going to bed every day hoping that I just don't wake up, right? I just don't have the gumption to kill myself, but it would be a lot better for everybody if it was just over. And I found an opportunity to do so. This is just the kind of idiot that I am. There was this couple and I knew them and they had kind of been in the same circles that had run around and they both had HIV, right? And all I knew from HIV was I'm an 80s kid. It's like what you grow up with and, if you get HIV, you die. And I thought to myself, if I sleep with that girl, I'll get HIV, the clock will start, I'm going to go get life insurance. Well, I'm not telling, but I'm going to get a life insurance policy, and then I think I'm going to head over to Europe. And I'm just going to backpack in Europe, I'm going to drink until I die, and then my kid will be okay. I'm already not in his life, and his life's probably better off without me anyway. Might as well try to get him some money. That would fix something, or that would be worth anything. So I did that, and I believed that I thought I had HIV for years. And I would black out and I would sleep with a number of women, and I would come out of a blackout and I would think to myself, oh my God, I just murdered a lot of people. And then I would black out again because that was impossible to deal with. And because it turns out I'm not a murderer. I have, like I said, I cannot reconcile the person that I am, the morals that I have, with the actions that I'm taking, and I can't understand it. It's just absolute torture. And so I just black out. I mean, that was really sent me into another oblivion, over and over and over again. I was already not sober, and it was just worse. Eventually, I ended up back in Raleigh. I had convinced my mother I was living with my grandmother, because parents, I had run, I just couldn't go back there. I wasn't welcome there. And so I moved in with my grandmother in Austin, and I was going to take care of her. And she lived in a retirement community. We lived on a golf course and a lake. And I thought to myself, this is exactly perfect. I am just going to live in this retirement community. I deserve to retire. I'm 28 years old at the time. And this is my plan. And so anyway, that went really badly for 2 years. I bartended in Austin because it was the only job that I could get, and it was the only job that I could drink on the job, because there is no possibility of me not drinking no matter where I go. And that was one that kind of invited it. And I'm a great bartender. I pour heavy, and I'm fun until I black out. But I will wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning with the shakes and drink a little bit and close the bar back down, so it can open up the next day. But that was just unacceptable to the owner and 3 other owners in that town. So I bounced around bartending. Anyway, I convinced my mother that I was just too young to really have to take care of my grandmother. And she was having trouble, and someone like her own child should be taking care of her. Because that's the arrogant, ungrateful kind of person that I am. I'm self-centered to the core. And really I just needed to get out of there. And it was a good way to manipulate my mother into moving her mother closer to her, which meant I would move closer and just start somewhere new again, new chapter, same book. And I was in Raleigh, September of 14, and so I guess I made it maybe about 5 months before my last day drinking. It was my 30th birthday. I woke up excited for the first time in a long time. I don't know why. I had absolutely no reason to be. What my days looked like by then is I would wake up at about 4 o'clock in the morning with the shakes. I would go to the kitchen and start drinking Granny's vodka, because I'm out of my, my rumplements. Yeah, you should giggle, because that's not a real man's drink, But it was mine. It was 100 proof, and it smelled like mint, and I was convinced if I drank that you didn't know I was drinking, and I had good breath. And that's what we're going with. So. And it was cheap. So I would walk into the kitchen, I would drink Granny's vodka, and I would chug it. I was taking big gulps, and it was just so I could get back to bed. And by the time I would make it to the doorway of my room, I already knew it wasn't enough. And I'd turn around and I would go back to the kitchen, I would drink again, and I would do this about 3 or 4 times. Until finally I had just enough in me to go back to sleep. And then I'd wake up at a normal time, like normal people, and really do nothing. I would drink to brush my teeth. I would drink if I was going to eat anything. I would drink to try to find a job. I went to interviews drunk. And on that day, I went to a second interview and got the job. And it was a great day. I'm turning 30, it's a new page, it's a new time, I got a job. And so I went to my watering hole. Actually, I stopped at the liquor store first because I had to refill Granny's vodka. But I went to the liquor store and I grabbed 4 airplane bottles and, bottle of Rumple Mints and replenished Granny's vodka with her credit card in her car, by the way. And I'm celebrating, so I get to the bar, it opens at 11, and I don't work there. I'm not there to open the bar, other than I just want to sit at the bar stool and drink with the people that know me, because I'm there every day. And a couple of airplane bottles on the way to the job interview, and then one on the way to the bar. And they know it's my birthday, and that's important. So I'm there at 11. I drink about 6 shots and a beer. That's what the tab said. I don't really remember. Chugged the airplane bottle on the way out, and proceeded to go home, which was, I don't know, about a few miles. But I do not remember the drive. I remember coming to, there was a car in front of me, and just in time I swerved out of the way. But I nicked their taillight. And this girl jumps out of the car, and she's freaking out. It's her boss's car. And I said, hey, there's an AutoZone right there. I'll go get you a new taillight and put it in for you. No problem. And she's like, I think we should call the cops. And I said, yeah, I already did. I reported the accident. Let's get off the road. And she moved, and I took off. And 10 minutes later, the exact same thing happened. I came to, and there was a car in front of me, and I was going about 50 miles an hour, and I did not have time to swerve, and I did not hit the brakes. And I slammed into the back of that car. I totaled my grandmother's car, I totaled that person's car, and then I spun and hit a third car. It was a commotion. And I just remember coming to, and the first thing I did was try to start the car. I was a block away from home, my grandmother's house, coming from the opposite direction of the first wreck. So I think I zigzagged on the way there just to throw the cops off. That's the only thing I can come up with, because it just doesn't make sense. But the cops show up and they say, have you been drinking today? And for the first time in my life, I remember the surrender. I felt it. And I looked at him and I said, I drink every day. And he said, well, how much have you been drinking? And I said, it's always too much. I don't know. And I said, let's go to jail. And he said, okay. And put me in the car. And that's what I did. And then I got to jail, and it was this quick, right? This quick. I get there, and I think the adrenaline's going now. And so I've got this burst of energy, and I'm blowing in the machine, and they're like, God, 0.23, it's noon, And I said, they were like, you don't even look drunk. I said, I know, your machine's broken, and y'all need to let me out of here. And they didn't. I told them I needed to call 911 to go to the hospital, and I ended up in the hospital, and really nothing was broken somehow, miraculously, and I can report that person was not killed and didn't have any major injuries. They were hurt. They had some problems, but we're okay. Nothing that was life altering. Could have been a different story. There could have been a baby in that car. Thank God there wasn't. And so I went to jail, and I remember waking up in jail and thinking, oh no, I'm in a metal bunk. I swear to God I'd never be here again, and how did I get here? And I've got a cast or a wrap on one arm, and the other one's in a sling, and there's papers on top of me, and I'm just done. And the memories kind of just start, like, just little, I guess people call them brownouts. Like, you just start remembering a little bit about what happened. It's like a little clip, And I remember I was in an accident, and then, God dang, that was the second car of my grandmother's that I totaled, and she's at home without a car, and I got in a big accident. Shit, this is my third DUI. That's prison time, because I'm a street lawyer. I know what's going to happen. Man, and I just, it all was just coming back to me, and I thought, God, I hope they have AA in the prison that they send me to. And I think that was really my full moment of surrender. I didn't care if I got out of jail. I knew I was better off in jail, right? Outside of jail, like I'm a menace to society. I'm out here wrecking cars that aren't mine and murdering people, and or thinking that I am, and I just don't belong, you know. And I'm an absent father, and I can't justify that, or, you know, I'm just too drunk to see my kid. It's the worst feeling in the world for me. So I came to AA. My buddy bailed me out. It took him 3 days. That's why I think he's a good friend. He didn't know if it was going to be the right thing to do, so he had to sit on it for a few days. But he bailed me out, and I went to AA. And I didn't know really how to do AA. I remember how I did AA before, which is I went to a bunch of meetings and hung out with a bunch of sober people. I did some of the steps, you know. I did the 4th step, and I did it like it was a confession. You know, I just shared a bunch of shameful things, and someone said that was good enough, and then it felt good enough, so I didn't really do much else. You know, hung out and went to meetings. So I can tell you that based off of that, if I don't work steps and hang out in AA, the best I've got is about 18 months. And when I got here this time, I was terrified that was all this was going to do, and I didn't believe that AA might work for me. But what happened was people told their stories, and it wasn't about I lost my home and my wife, and here's all the DUIs that I got and all the things that happened to me. They talked about things like I could not show up to pick up my child, and it was because I was drinking, and the only way I knew how to fix that was to drink more. And it doesn't make sense, but it's the only thing that made sense. And I could understand exactly what they were saying, because they were describing how I felt and what I thought and what I was going through that I could never have put words to. And in that moment, I had the tiniest bit of hope that there might be something here. And so I came back, and I got a sponsor. You know, I knew the game, and I wasn't going to wait around, because I know what happens. Like I don't have the ability to stay sober. So if there's a hope shot here, I'm going to do whatever that is and whatever that takes. And I found a sponsor, and we began to work the steps, and I got relief, you know, and I worked, you know, all the steps. And my story may be similar or different. You know, I've heard the story before. What happened was about 2 years into sobriety, somewhere right around there. So I'd kind of neatly evaded the God issue, you know. I was okay. It's just said, you know, whatever, higher power, we're good with that. You know, I'm okay with that. But, you know, the God thing and the personal relationship with this creator, I'm going to kind of skip that. And they, you know, there are a lot of meetings where you hear things like, yeah, it's okay. You know, just believe, I believe, and whatever. And I got to tell you, that's good enough to make a beginning. But if you don't come back to it, you might have the feeling or the experience that I had, and it was about 2 years sober. And I'm just sitting with a bunch of friends, and, you know, we're just kind of like judging and talking about other people in AA, thinking that it's kind of harmless. But I just remember thinking, this feels real familiar, you know? And I realized that I had surrounded myself with the same kind of people that I was with before I got sober. And I thought, well, why in the world am I sober? And what's wrong with me? And what's happening? And what I realized, it was kind of this just, a bit of we'll call it a spiritual experience. But I woke up a little bit too. And there's one thing that was extremely true, which was I had worked the steps, and I'm going to meetings, and I'm being of service, you know. And I'm involved, and I love AA. But I thought that meetings and hanging out and service was AA. What I had missed, or what I had realized at that moment, was the way they talk about God in this book, and the power and the access to power does not align with how I feel about it. And I knew that if I can't figure this out, or if I can't get an experience that this book describes, I'm not going to make it. And that absolutely terrified me, because my life started getting better. If you stop drinking, your life gets better, just automatically. You got more money. You know, people reach out, they give you jobs and help you. And, you know, we're a great group of folks. And it's nobody's fault, really, that happened, you know. That's just what I heard and what I latched on to. But that realization came, and it became very true, and I knew I needed a new experience. And I asked this other man to sponsor me. I got a new sponsor, and I said, man, this is exactly, I said, I don't believe in God the way that this book talks about. And I'm afraid that if I don't, I'm going to drink again. I know that I will. And he said, that's okay. He said, are you willing to do what I do? And I said, yes. And he said, okay. And so we went through this book, and we went through it line by line, and we stopped and asked questions. It was a very different experience going through the book this way. I don't know why. It might have been that just God brought me to a point where I could then be ready. You know, there's a lot of grace in here, and my life is riddled with grace. And when I got here, I couldn't say the word God. You know, and today I use the word God, and it's a 3-letter word that's quick to say. I don't try to tell anyone what I think God is or isn't. I think, honestly, the more that I think I know what God is, like, the further away I get from it. So whatever your God is my God. But I have a very personal relationship with this Creator, this being, this spirit of intelligence, or spirit of the universe and creative intelligence, and I have access to power that I did not have before. And so I just became a big book thumper. Okay, I am unapologetically a big book thumper. If it's in the book, we're going to do it. If it's not in the book, I'll hear about it, but I'm not going to put much stock in it. And what continues to happen is an incredibly amazing new experience every time I'm in the book with somebody. So I made amends to that wife, and she didn't want to hear it at first. And she was remarried and happily remarried, and and my son had a new dad, and I was just bitter about that, man, so resentful. But I made amends to her, and what's funny is I remember the phone call. She just called me, and she was crying, and I just knew. Like, I knew there was a moment about to happen. I pulled over on the side of the road and just gave her all my attention, and she was just crying, and she hadn't quite gotten divorced yet, but I think there was some trouble there. And it's not what she talked about. She just said, I can't believe the person that you are. And she said, and what hurts the most is that you couldn't be that person with me, right? Because the amends wasn't about, like, man, I'm sorry that I treated you badly, or, I shouldn't have cheated on you. When we do that sex inventory, it says, what should I have done? It wasn't I shouldn't have cheated on you. It was, I should have respected you enough and been man enough to have a conversation with you to create an exit plan for this marriage that we neither one of us want to be in, and admit my alcoholism and let you free of that, right? That was the kind of amends that I made to her. And it's funny, it took her a long time. She wouldn't, first year of sobriety, I didn't see my kid. I got him for 1 week in the summer. And the second year, it was 2 weeks. And the third year, it was 3 weeks. And I thought, well, I guess, somewhere around 12 years, I ought to have somewhere around some kind of custody agreement. And the following month, she let me take him to Greece. And he stayed with me. And I got to be the father that I wasn't before, And even in that 1 and 2 and 3 week period, I got to be a dad. And then time went on, and then I'll have them for spring breaks and Thanksgiving and Christmas time and summertime and all the vacations. And I'm trusted with them. And that's an odd thing, because What I'm known for is being so drunk in the morning that when I drive him to daycare, I swerve off the road and slam into the barrier on the highway. Wreck my car and call a cab to get him back to his mom. Oh, it turns out, by the way, this is important, I always forget this part, I don't have HIV. My sponsor, the incredibly intelligent person that I was, convinced that I had HIV, drinking over it for many, many years, and convinced that when I saw amends, I was like, my God, that's going to be terrible. I'm going to do it, but I got to tell people that they're dying. Yeah, he's like, hey, you need to go get tested. And I said, all right, whatever. And I just, at that point, I was doing whatever they said, right? People said, do what your sponsor says, so I did that. Get test results back, they're negative. I mean, I was sweating that period. I don't know why, because I was already convinced, but hope had set in, for the first time. So I guess I cared about life. And test came out, they were negative. And I was like, my God, I drank over that for a really long time, under that belief. That was a huge relief. I don't know how it was possible. It turns out there's science behind it. There's science to support the opposite as well. So, however that happened, I'm going to give that one to God, right? Today, life looks very different. So I began to have an experience with this book and with this creator. And what it did was it began to show me power. And I only did that by doing some very difficult but simple things, right? The leveling of pride, right? The searching and fearless inventories. And I do them. I do them annually. I do them at least once a year. I go through the steps all over again. With either my sponsor or someone else, and I look for an open mind, a new experience. I have a very clear first step experience every time I do it. And the book is perfectly laid out to have that happen. And with that first step experience, I get powered into the second, third, fourth step, and so forth. And I get to have a very new experience with all of those every single time. Can you imagine that? What if you just worked the steps one time and lived off that experience your entire sobriety? I know people that do it, and that's great, but man, there's a lot more if you want it. And it's beautiful. Right now I'm working with about 25 people in a workshop. I do these workshops as often as I can. I don't do them in case you think that it's because I like doing this or I came up here to wear a suit and spread the good word of AA. Like, this was not what I signed up for. I just think I'm sick enough that if I don't do these kind of things, I might not make it. God may not have a use for me anymore. But I'm working with, 25 men and women, and we're going through the big book line by line in the way that a man named Don Pritz used to sponsor his sponsees. And I believe that he has touched this meeting in this area. And he's one of my greatest AA heroes. I found one of his sponsees, and really a bunch of them. A guy named Mark H. changed my entire view of sobriety and of God in just one talk. Changed my view about the 10th and 11th step in just one talk. And I remember I sought that man out like you do, when you're on fire and desperate. And I found out he was dead, and I was devastated, and then I looked for people he had touched. And I find them, and I talk to them regularly. And what's interesting is that every one of them comes back to inventory, the 10th and 11th step, and this belief in God, and going through the big book, turning statements into questions. So that's what we do in our workshops, and having done that, it changes me. And I hope to God it changes others. I know that it does. I get to see it. So I don't really have to hope much. Like, I know it's effective, and I get to see other people's lives just rocket, into that fourth dimension. But I say that because, I'm not doing that to toot my horn or to try to be somebody. I'm doing it because I'm sick enough, I'm the kind of alcoholic that needs that. I have to work with others. If I do not, it's really clear that this just doesn't work. That's like the magic behind it all. You know, I can do all the inventories in the world, and I can be a great meditator. I can be empowered and have guidance all day long. And if I don't carry this message to that next person who needs the hope that I did when I got here, I've seen it over and over again. I don't have experience with it, but I've seen plenty of folks look like everything was okay and they drank again, and I think it's all tied to that. I think that's probably a good place to end this message. So I thank you guys for having me up here, and I'm grateful to be here. This is an honor. Thank you.